It's been quiet on the Cup front, but as the clock counts down, there's been plenty bubbling on behind the scenes. So let's start with what the next batch of AC75s will look like. Given that the hulls will be the same basic shapes, most of the key differences will be in areas that are difficult to see. So, to provide a reminder as to what's in store with the hardware, who better a person to guide us through the main changes than the original chief architect of the AC75, Emirates Team New Zealand's Dan Bernasconi.
Altitude.
For this America's Cup, there's a couple of really significant changes. This time around, we're not going to have any cyclors, and the power used to control the sails will all be supplied by batteries. So every team will have an identical system that will all be controlled to mimic the amount of power that the 4 cyclors on the yacht would be able to generate. And we're taking that from data from the last Cup so that there isn't unlimited power available and teams still have to be efficient in the way they use that power. In doing that, we wanted all of the crew, the 5 crew members, to be really involved in sailing the boat. At least one of those is mandated to be female. Whether we'll see women helming or flight control or strategy and tactics, I think there'll be some variation across the fleet. Everyone will look at the team of people they have and try and get everyone doing the roles that they're best at. The other really significant change for this America's Cup, you could say it's a change, you could say it's staying the same, but we're not going to be building new hulls this time around. By not building new hulls, we're getting double the value out of the hulls we have got, which is a huge cost saving and a huge environmental saving. The differences between the hulls are more visual than performance related. There's much more to be gained in the foils, the sails and the control systems. There's still a really long way to go with making the sails work well across the range in optimizing the shape and structure of the sails and the hydraulic systems that we're using to control them. I think the racing will be closer in AC38. Everyone feels they could have got a bit more out of the boat. Also in Naples, the breeze is a little bit stronger on average. We're also going to see some different sorts of racing. Looking forward to having fleet racing and maybe switching up the match racing a bit. It's going to be a pretty cool event.
The latest developments in the Cup are focused on the teams. Part fact, part gossip, there's plenty to report on. So, who's in? In short, the Kiwis, Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli, the French K Challenge, the British and the Swiss Alinghi team are all officially signed up for the 38th America's Cup. Sounds simple, doesn't it? And you won't have to wait long for it to get going, because it sounds like racing will start with the AC40s in the spring. But Cup cycles are never that straightforward. You might not be surprised to hear that the Swiss are back, but if you've been following the twists and turns, you'll know that their participation has been anything but certain. In fact, several months ago, they stated that they were out. From what I was hearing, they weren't all that happy with how things have been going later on either. And yet, with no mention of this on their team website or on their social media, the press release issued by the Kiwis says they're in. Good, because that will make for a more interesting Challenger selection series, especially as they've been there plenty of times before. But the title of the press release provides a hint at the big change in the way that the Cup will be run this time. It refers to 5 teams entering the America's Cup, not Defender and Challengers. Now, being old-fashioned and a bit of a stickler for maintaining the proud and time-honoured tradition of the Cup, I'd normally be ignoring the reference to the total number of teams that are competing and breaking it down into the number of challengers and defenders. It's my kind of maths too. Simply subtract 1 defender from the total and you have the number of challengers. At least it's been that way since 1995, when there were 3 defenders. But before you accuse me of being petty, I'd argue that it's important to remember that the America's Cup itself is between the successful challenger and a defender. Despite the impression that may be created with fleet races and a subtle new language, it is not a World Championships. The reference to 5 teams is a subtle reflection of a major change for this Cup. Traditionally, the defender and the challenger of record would work together to create and manage the entire cup cycle, with the challenger of record representing the other challengers, especially when it came to setting up the Challenger Selection Series. And while the Royal Yacht Squadron has put in a lot of work to date with the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron, from here on the event will be managed by the America's Cup Partnership, the ACP. In other words, all the competitors. You may think I'm splitting hairs, but that is a big change. When it comes to a vote on key issues on or off the water, my understanding is that each team has an equal say. Given how easily the Cup can descend into major squabbles, I wonder how easy this cycle is actually going to be. Don't get me wrong, I really hope that the new system works and that the 38th Cup will be the most harmonious so far. But I've been involved with enough to know that there will always be spats along the way. There is still talk of other teams joining, but it's surely going to be a big ask to be there in time for racing in the spring. The American team, Riptide Racing, headed up by match racing world champion Chris Poole, is looking to raise $50 million to compete. There's no talk of what boat they would use, but there's not that many to choose from, so perhaps this means that the American Magic Machine might be theirs. Who knows? Rumours are still floating around about an Australian team that might be looking at one of the old Kiwi boats, but again, it's getting pretty late. And then there's talk of a second Italian team, but beyond that, there's very little more to be said.
For UK supporters, there have been a couple of key announcements that were made whilst you were late night shopping in the run-up to Christmas. The first was the appointment of Ian Walker as the CEO of Athena Racing.
Moving across from North Sails, Walker has a great deal of Cup experience, having been the skipper for GBR Challenge back in 2002 in Auckland and tactician aboard the Italian Plus 39 team in Valencia in 2007, led by Ian Percy. He's also a very accomplished sailor, having won the Volvo Ocean Race and 2 Olympic medals, among a long list of records and successes. He's also from the same Olympic generation as Ben Ainsley and gets on well with him, so I'm sure they'll make a very effective duo. But interestingly, his appointment displaces Ainsley from the CEO role. In a recent podcast, Ben suggested that he might not be on the boat for the next Cup either. Some might not be surprised at that, but if he's not on the boat and not CEO, what will his role be? The team press release states that Sir Ben will focus on governance, commercial development, while continuing to support the performance group. That will be a big change. On that subject, here's a piece of pure speculation from me. With it sounding less likely that Ben will be driving and that the obvious helm for one of the slots will be Dylan Fletcher, who will be on the other side of the boat. Some have suggested Giles Scott, maybe. But now that American Magic is out of the next Cup, what about that Brit who also loves moth sailing as much as Dylan Fletcher? You know, Paul Goodison. Just a thought. The same press release provided the second key British announcement, confirmation of the team's funding. Oakley Capital, no, not the sunglasses, will have a majority ownership in the British America's Cup team, Athena Racing, for this and, it says, multiple future America's Cup cycles. Aside from being good news from the team, multiple future America's Cup cycles is not something you hear from any team very often, if ever. But again, I'd suggest that this is an indication as to just how different this cycle is as a result of the ACP. Whether you like the idea or not, backers now see financial opportunities in the newly structured Cup. Oakley Capital is a good example. Among many assets, Oakley owns North Sails Group, which in turn owns North Sails, Doyle Sails, Quantum Sails, Southern Spars, Hall Spars, Future Fibers and RigPro. So it's easy to see why they're interested in getting more deeply involved in the America's Cup. It also might provide a clue as to Ian Walker's transfer from North Sails to the team. If so, it certainly makes sense. At this stage, you might be thinking that the Cup is getting too commercial. If so, you'd not be alone. Once the playground of some of the wealthiest people in the world, the difference now is that there are far fewer people that are willing to sink huge sums of money into a Cup campaign. Today, most things have to have some kind of a return, and it would appear that the Cup, prestigious though it is, has fallen into this category too. And while few in the Cup camp would like to admit it openly, it's also under pressure from SailGP when it comes to attracting money. I've been told on several occasions over the last few months by a variety of insiders that it was the AC partnership and the financial investment that was possible that secured funding for this next Cup. Without it, the Cup would have stalled. So for now, it is what it is, as they say. The Cup has funding, those that have entered do too, and the action kicks off in a few months' time with the next America's Cup in the summer of 2027. Now, if you thought that plans for teams to work together under the ACP sounded familiar, you'd be right. Back in 2017, a very similar plan called the Framework Agreement had been agreed by most of the teams. Here are a few clips of some familiar faces talking about this agreement during the America's Cup in Bermuda in 2017.
This is a hugely significant moment for the America's Cup. For the first time in more than 165 years, teams have got together for the benefit not only for themselves but for the America's Cup.
This framework agreement is really pivotal to the future of the America's Cup. The Cup has an incredible history, but now for the first time in over 165 years, the teams and the America's Cup Event Authority can actually start planning for the future.
When an America's Cup ends, there's always a one-year vacuum where no one really knows what's going on. And I think there's a real reason why Super Bowls, why the modern day Olympics, why you have plans in place for future events. It's good for the fans, it's great for the athletes and the team members, and more importantly, it's great commercially. So I think this is a win-win for everyone.
Well, we're trying to recruit more teams. We'd like to see twice as many teams in AC36, and so we got a rule out there that people who want to start racing, they know how much it's going to cost, what kind of boat they need to build. They knew the rule can't change on them, so no team, including the defender or the challenger of record, can get a competitive advantage. So they're able to plan ahead, build a boat, build a team, and come out and compete for their country.
There are real benefits in getting together and preventing the stop-start nature of the America's Cup. I'm now confident more teams, more venues, more partners, all of the stakeholders will be incentivized to get involved and to connect with the America's Cup long term, which has to be good for not only the America's Cup, but the whole sport in general.
Well, I think this announcement is probably one of the most defining moments of the sport.
The trouble was, it didn't happen, at least not until now, albeit under another name and a different group of teams that are now organising it. But the thing that I find fascinating, and there's been lots of criticism on both sides about the fact that the Kiwis wouldn't sign up to it then and now they're doing it now. Set all that aside, the thing that's very interesting is this conversation about getting teams together to move the Cup forward is not a conversation that started a few months ago. This is something that's been going for some time. Now, if you watch SailGP, those comments will doubtless strike a chord, which leads me on to wondering whether the 2017 Cup in Bermuda was the most influential in the history of the event, in that it gave us SailGP and a completely new style of high-performance sailing in the America's Cup, along with a concept that has spread well beyond the Cup boats. What do you think? Drop us a line in the comments. In the meantime, from a very cold and chilly Hamble River, Happy New Year, and we'll see you soon.